How is everyone's sound? Good?
Yes,
Yeah.
loud and
Okay.
clear.
We have a couple of minutes. We'll get started. Okay, 2 o'clock. We're all here. Welcome to this meeting of the Montpelier City Council's Country Club Road Subcommittee. My name is Sal Alfano. I'm the chair of the committee. The other two-thirds of the committee are here, Adrian Gill and Ben Doyle. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Without objection, the agenda will be approved. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Our main item today is an interview with Pennrose, one of 4 firms being considered for development of housing at Country Club Road. Our goal today is to ask questions that are being posed to all 4 development teams, as well as questions customized for Pennrose. This process represents our continuing commitment to transparency and fiscal responsibility, and to our goal of creating housing that meets the pressing needs of the community. The last of these interviews is with Executive Suite, and it's scheduled for this Friday, April 3rd at 10 a.m. Please check the city website and regular posting locations to confirm the date and time. Just a quick note about confidentiality. These interviews are being conducted in open session. Our experience has been that the development teams have responded with as much candor as possible, given the public nature of this process. But if during the interview we learn that a question involves topics of a proprietary nature, we'll seek the information by alternative means that protects confidentiality within the provisions of Vermont's open meeting law and the Public Records Act. We've planned a little more than an hour for this interview. We look forward to Pennrose opening with a brief presentation, after which subcommittee members and city staff will ask questions and engage in what we hope will be a fruitful dialogue. With that, I will turn it over to our partner in this process, Brian Pine of White & Burke, for introductions.
Thank you,
Thanks, Brian.
Sal. As Sal mentioned, I'm Brian Pine. I'm with White & Burke Real Estate Advisors. We're the consultant to the city on this development selection process and development advice overall for the city to be able to reach its goal with respect to housing on the Country Club Road property. And Sal introduced the city councilors who make up the subcommittee. Our city team is here, and they're essential to this process. Maybe raise hands, but Matthew Jelasik is here from the planning department, as is planning director Mike Miller, Evelyn Prim, who's our communications coordinator for the city. Alec Ellsworth is in attendance, isn't a member of the subcommittee, but is providing important input from the perspective of the city park system. And have I missed anybody from our team, Mike, Evelyn, or did I hit everybody? Okay, great.
Got it.
So we'll let the Pennrose team take it from here, Sal, I think.
Great.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So Joe will actually share his screen. I think oftentimes pictures help tell 1,000 words. So we'll run through this slide quickly to give you a bit of an overview. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time today. My name is Carmen Chung. I'm from Penrose. I'm the regional that oversees our New England office. And we're really excited to be here to have some time to meet with you all, help you get to know us a bit better, and talk through the thought processes that went into our proposal for this Country Club Road site. Next slide, Joe. So I want to start with acknowledging and thanking the city for the bold vision that you've laid out in the actionable plan and the thoughtful process that you've undertaken to select a development partner. It demonstrates to us the city's deep commitment to championing and pushing this plan forward. And that's important from our perspective because whenever we start a new project, our first question is really, who cares about this project aside from us? And the answer to that is very clear here. It's the city leadership, it's the city staff, it's the community. And we believe that the best projects always come from a place of deep partnership. And I hope that through today, this committee can better understand our approach to collaborative development. It's how we do what we do that sets us apart. It's impact through execution. So next slide. And before we dive into our proposal, I also wanted to talk about our team because ultimately we know that the city is not simply choosing a proposal, you're choosing a long-term partner that you can trust to execute on a shared vision. And on this slide is not just people who are on the Zoom meeting, but these are the people who, if we're selected, will be following this project all the way through from permitting to financing to construction and stabilized operations. So even though Penrose is a national firm, we take a very regional approach to development. And myself, Becca Schofield, and Joe Gaddy from our New England office will be continuing to be the primary points of contact for the city throughout the entire development process. On the slide also is our architect, Union Studios, our landscape architect, Carly Cottrell, civil engineers, Du Bois and King, our property manager is an affiliated property management company with Penrose, as well as our proposed general contractor with Haynes, which is a contractor we've worked with on dozens of projects at this point. So next slide, please. So just a little quick overview about Penrose. We're a developer, owner, and operator of mixed income and affordable housing. And what that means is that we maintain long-term ownership and manage almost everything we build. When we take on a project, we see ourselves as becoming your neighbors and becoming a part of the community. There's no exit plan, which means that we care deeply about how the project serves residents, not just on day one, but for the years to come. A vast majority of the 27,000 units that we've built have utilized low-income housing tax credits, which is the program we would propose to utilize here. And we layer that with an alphabet soup of funding. We would consider ourselves experts in assembling and the complex layered financing for workforce housing projects like what we're proposing here. Next slide. So we have our own affiliated property management company, as I mentioned earlier, and that's because we know that delivering on the vision is not just about the brick and mortar of the buildings itself, but it's about the lived experience of our residents. Our property management colleagues are part of our development process from day one, because listening to their feedback is what will make sure that these will be communities that are easy to maintain and great to live in. That's why we always commit to having on-site property management and maintenance staff to ensure that our residents get the attention they need and deserve. And that's what we would be doing here. Our experience managing these properties also led us to create our design standards, where building high energy efficient is our baseline. It's not focused on going after the next shiny new badge or buzzword, but it's based on our experience on what will ensure that we have durable buildings that can be maintained in the long term and ensure resident comfort. This is all just really to emphasize that once a project is constructed, we don't sell, we don't hand off, we don't disappear once construction is done. We're there on site day to day with our management team members, and that long-term involvement really creates accountability for the city. Next slide. So now we'll dive into our proposal at a high level and talk through what guided us as we developed our plan. I'll do a quick overview here and then hand it over to the design team. So first, we really started with the idea of working with the land, not against it. By respecting the existing topography and natural landscape, we were able to site buildings in a way that minimized disturbance and naturally defined where development made sense. From there, we focused on creating a strong sense of place through the architecture to create a sense of a community, while balancing really with achieving the density that the city requested in the RFP. And then lastly, we used open space and landscape design to tie the whole site together. So now I'll hand it off to Paul from Union Studio to go into a bit of a greater detail.
Thank you, Carmen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Atteman, and I'm a principal at Union Studio Architecture and Community Design. My colleague Brendan Herr is also here in attendance. Union is a nationally practicing architecture and community design firm driven by our mission to use the power of design to enrich lives and strengthen communities. We recognize how important design is for connecting people to a place and to cultivate community. As partners, we really work alongside our clients and in the communities to create and fulfill their vision. Next slide, please. And then the next slide, please. Understanding the natural features and elements of a site is crucial for any development that's being considered, and the cities really realize that with their work that they've done to date. The actionable plan for this site documents the land and site conditions with natural resources map that shows tributaries, wetlands, floodplains, topography, wooded areas, open space, soil types, and more. But also the mapping plan showed the human imprint over time, such as trails, bike paths, railroads down at the bottom of the hill, railroad tracks, recreation areas, and buildings and paved areas have all developed over time. The city's conceptual framework was an important starting point for our design process. It clearly expressed a desire to weave housing into the landscape without overwhelming it. Next, please. As we studied the topography and the wetlands and access points and recreation uses more closely, we refined that framework into a plan that maintains the spirit of the city's vision. The organizing element of the community is a new extension of Country Club Road that serves as the neighborhood's central spine as it meanders along the contours, making it up the hillside. It also connects the proposed residential areas, establishing a logical sequence as one moves through the site, passing by wetlands, pockets of wooded areas, and the recreation amenities. Next, please. By concentrating development along this central spine, we preserve larger contiguous open space to the west and avoid fragmenting the landscape with dispersed building pads and roads. Preserving and integrating a majority of the site's natural features allows for active recreational amenities such as team sports, the hiking, cross-country skiing, and every kid's dream, sledding. The costly infrastructure is minimized and a variety of housing can be envisioned. Next, please. The missing middle is a term that some of you might have heard, and it applies to a type of housing that has all but disappeared from the current housing stock in the United States. It's a missing because although it was historically present, we still have it today in towns and cities throughout Vermont and New England. It's the very fabric of a lot of these communities. However, missing middle typologies range from multi-unit or clustered housing types, compatible in scale and with single-family homes that help meet the growing demand for housing and walkable communities. The variety of forms and densities shown here in this diagram are very familiar to us. When employed thoughtfully and strategically, as we've proposed here, safe streetscapes, pocket parks, and a variety of housing options can be created. These typologies are the basis of the proposed neighborhood design. Next, please. This is about the architecture, and as one enters the site from Montpelier Road, the first residential building is a 44-unit elevator-served corridor building. Is positioned intentionally near the entrance. This serves as the neighborhood's gateway and establishes architectural character for what follows. It's one of the most level areas of the site, as many know, and an ideal opportunity for a larger building footprint. Although it's not really considered a missing middle building type, this multifamily building will be integral in achieving the overall number of homes envisioned. Next. Continuing a little further along the roadway, the character begins to shift. Medium density walk-up buildings in both 12 and 18 unit configurations line the street and anchor one end of the village green. These buildings frame the street in a way that feels cohesive and walkable, reinforcing the sense that one is moving through the neighborhood rather than a series of isolated developed pods. Next. As the roadway progresses further north, the density begins to taper. A cluster of stacked flats arranged in a column of, a common green introduces a more intimate residential experience. Each unit has its own direct entrance, offering comfort and identity of one's home within an efficient footprint. The common green also reinforces community interaction while maintaining sensitivity to wetlands and natural contours. Next. At the northern end of the development, the neighborhood transitions fully into low-density housing. We propose 42 story townhomes that are arranged along a partially looped road, which creates a nice residential enclave that frames existing recreation fields and forms an edge along the top of the site. By clustering development more intentionally in the eastern and central buildable zones, which we've talked about a few times, we really are protecting substantial contiguous natural areas rather than dispersing buildings across their property. The variety of building types proposed also offers opportunities for variations in massing, in scale, and architectural detailing, which we haven't gotten into yet, which we will craft carefully to be contextual to Montpelier's and Vermont's vernacular fabric. And I'd like to introduce our landscape architect, Jean-Paul Charbonneau, who will discuss the next development objective.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jean-Paul Charbonneau. I'm a landscape architect with Crowley Cottrell. We're a Boston-based firm. The first thing that I'd like to say is that as landscape architects, we are often come in at the tail end of a development plan. And as for this team, we are in the unique position where we are at the table for site organization early on in the process, which is unique from our experiences. The other thing that we bring a different set of perspectives and point of view to this project and this team, and where most would see an abandoned golf course, we see a network of natural systems and features, which include unique topography, woodlands, ravines throughout the property, and which this development has the unique opportunity to connect to and extend. Next slide. Zooming in a little bit on the development itself, the development is organized and has key unique landscape features, which are shown in the left column of the images with the black circles. These include a variety of landscape spaces, such as a common green or community space, a small scale park, a playground, and surrounding it are the natural, active and passive recreational areas that surround this community, and which we feel that this development can knit and tie into. By keeping this development small or keeping it concentrated, we can preserve much of the surroundings for active and passive recreation, which can be expanded and improved. Next slide, and I'll hand it over to Carmen after that. Thank you.
Great. So I'll kind of wrap us up because I know the goal is to ask a lot of questions with this slide that we show in almost every presentation we do about Pennrose. And it's really to say that our interest in this site stems from our interest in working with the city and the vision that you've laid out. We see ourselves as helping to execute that vision. And we think that our proposal is a second or maybe even third draft of your original master plan, one that is thoughtfully phased, it's achievable, it's responsive to the RFP. But just as importantly, we fully expect it to keep on evolving with feedback from the city leadership, from the staff and the community to make it even better. So thank you for your time. And I think we can move on to the questions.
Well, thank you, Carmen. And, I really want to thank you and your team for the proposal. I thought it was extremely well organized, very easy to find information when I went back to, to check things out. The maps were extremely useful. We have a number of questions. I guess I'll start where you started with the corridor building. We recently had a forum where community members provided feedback. We had a survey online for a couple of weeks. Plus, they were able to inspect the proposals and ask questions. And one of the things we heard was about the Turtle Island Children's Center, which is currently leasing part of the existing building. And the lease is a 10-year lease, and it provides an option for adjoining one of the adjoining smaller parking lots on the southern side, on the eastern side of the access road. And the city also has tentative plans, not yet well formed, but for a recreational facility, an indoor recreational facility immediately to the east of the existing building.
Mm-hmm.
And several of your gateway buildings are in that particular area. And I'm just asking about that because I just wonder if alternative arrangements need to be made. It sounds like the conceptually that was an important part of your design, and I just wonder how you're thinking about it and how you might adjust if needed.
Yeah, I think we placed the mid-rise building there is partially because of the slopes on the site and wanting to minimize that impact. And when you have a bigger building, you kind of are trying to make sure the grades across the entire site are level enough to achieve that. I think we can look into whether the existing user really needs all that space, and if that entire parking lot needs to be utilized, we can kind of see if we can tweak where it's located. If they're like, we really need that entire space, then we can also have a lot of flexibility with the phasing of this site.
Mm-hmm.
And we could do it later. And I think that we are open to shifting things around. What will be the challenge is achieving the density and creating an elevator building that doesn't kind of work against the grade. But we're open to kind of moving things around and seeing how we can shift it. One of the challenges will just be the site work.
Well, yes, thank you for that. I realize it's early days, and I appreciate your response. I'm also, while we're on the topic, we got a lot of feedback about the fact that everything was a rental property. And of course, we knew that going in. You were very clear about that in your proposal. A couple before we get to some of the questions about financing, I just wanted to ask a little bit about your rental terms. We're discussing a short-term rental ordinance, and I know you've in some of the written questions you responded that you have a 12-month lease policy that pretty much prevents short-term rentals. I wonder if it applies though to subletting. Do you have a sublet policy that would also prevent that from happening?
Yeah, I think because of the tax credit program, there's a lot of restrictions on who can live in a
Uh-huh.
property. So that's actually not something that would be allowed because we need to make sure that whoever's living there is income qualified, so they need to be on the lease. So that's not allowed under our kind of compliance procedures also.
And in non-income restricted units, be a similar
So
situation?
I think if that's something that's important to the city,
Mhm.
we like to operate properties that don't have churn either. So we're
Okay.
open to that kind of restriction
Sounds
for,
like we're on the same page
yeah,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, some residents were also concerned that the Penrose might eventually sell the property to, an equity firm or something that might prioritize profit over tenants. And um, Vermont's qualified allocation plan requires 30 years of affordability. I'm sure you're aware of that. How does that align with your business model, and what happens after that 30-year period typically in your developments?
Yeah, it's pretty standard. Actually, some states require even like 50 years. And what happens typically is even before the 30-year period, we are assessing the property's condition. And typically after 15, 20, maybe even 25 years, you're looking at maybe the roof needs work, maybe your HVAC needs work, your windows need work. There's going to be a capital upgrade kind of point in time, usually before that 30-year mark, in which we would be like going back to the state to be like, we need to recapitalize. This is what our plan is. And we would work with them on financing to kind of support those capital improvements. And likely at that point in time, VHFA or VHCB would implement another kind of re-up the restrictions. So it's kind of a revolving door where we eventually make upgrades, refinance, and extend the affordability period.
Do you ever sell a property?
So far in our 50-year history, the only properties that we've sold have been like small 5, 10 unit projects that we've handed over basically to the nonprofit that we work
Mhm.
with. We don't, it's not our standard business model to sell our properties. Um, yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I also just want to echo Sal. Like, I really appreciated the proposal. I thought it was really well done, and I think you folks are clearly very good at what you do, and appreciate this conversation. I also just wanted to drill down though on some of the really around the financing issues, particularly like the LIHTC allocation in Vermont. Our understanding is um, well, I mean, this is a 100% LIHTC community, right? And the idea of the phasing is built on the availability of the LIHTC funds. And our understanding, frankly, is that at VHFA and VHCB, that the amount of funds contemplated for this project to meet the phasing that you've identified is not realistic, frankly. And so I'm just curious if you've had conversations with VHFA or VHCB just about the allocation level in Vermont, and even in particular thinking about like recapitalizing after 20 years. Just worried like, is there in fact enough of the resources available in Vermont to achieve the vision that you're talking about with the way you've structured the financing?
Yeah, so we have had conversations with VHFA and VHCB. We kind of showed them uh, sources and uses for what a phase one would look like. And their preliminary responses that this look generally is kind of in line with what they see as a project. I think the question about whether we can get 6 phases funded and the speed of which we can get those executed, all of these are kind of most LIHTC communities are public-private partnerships. It's about what the state's priorities are. And everything that we've heard from people we've talked to is that this is a strong state priority. This is in the capital. And we are always looking for additional ways to offset the state resources. We're always applying federal earmarks, applying to other grants to always be sourcing other funds because we know that it's a strain on the state's resources. But across the country, this is how kind of deed-restricted affordable housing is built. I think that's an ongoing conversation with the state, but we have had preliminary conversations with them before we even made the submission, and have heard that there is a lot of state support for the city in this redevelopment.
Great, thanks. I'm wondering if I could just follow up too. If like, is there a scenario in which it's not 100% LIHTC community, and that you bring in, for example, private capital to, into your financing stack to make it work?
So I think that is very uncommon for us because in looking at the rents in this area, I think the market rate rents to us are similar to what 80% AMI rent would be, which is an affordable rent. So in order to make the returns work, we also only do it on a very select few projects because our bread and butter is really these affordable mixed income housing projects. We don't take on many projects that are primarily market rate projects because we focus our attention on kind of these mixed income affordable projects. That's our main mission. So we're very selective with what projects that we do, kind of more market rate, more of a market rate deal. And for this one, based on what we've seen with the numbers, it would be challenging to make a more market rate deal work with where the rents are and where construction costs are. You'll see in kind of the capital stack that we submitted, the amount of kind of debt proceeds that we can generate from this is a small portion compared to what we're getting through tax credit equity, through subordinate financing. And a lot of that is related to the disparity between where rents are and what cost of building a high quality building takes nowadays. It's around $500,000 easily.
Thank you.
So continuing on that line, the tax assessment is it reflects the restricted rents, and there's some concern that the increment on this quantity of subsidized housing will really not be able to satisfy the increment financing bond, and that in fact may not even support maintenance. After that bond is retired. Do you have an idea of how that, if there is a shortfall, how it might be counted?
Yeah, so I think we're open to working very closely with the city on figuring out what this should look like. In a lot of communities that we build in, there is some sort of tax stabilization agreement. And we totally understand the need to balance like offsetting the cost of maintaining the infrastructure. And we're basically very open book. There's no kind of secrets in affordable housing financing because all of this gets submitted to the state anyways. We can kind of show the city what our numbers look like and figure out what the city needs in order to make sure it can maintain the infrastructure and what the project can support. Because with these projects, the goal is actually to cap the revenue because we're capping what rents we're charging residents to ensure that this is an affordable place for individuals to live. So we can show kind of what our numbers look like and work with the city to figure out what a appropriate tax stabilization amount is. And from there, it's pulling all the other levers we have in the capital stack to be able to ensure that we can support that tax payment.
Brian, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was helpful just to put a bit of a finer point on that, and I'm sure the Pennrose team is familiar with the challenge and sort of the inherent conflict between the need to grow the tax revenue from this property to service debt that is incurred to build the infrastructure, and the idea of tax stabilization. In Vermont, you may know this already as well, but I'll just repeat it as well, that the tax assessment needs to reflect the rent restrictions. So from a baseline standpoint, on a per unit basis, you're generating less tax revenue from the start because you've got a LIHTC property. So that's just a given. There's no tax stabilization because if there was, you'd have no increment or not enough increment to service debt for the infrastructure. So I think we're getting into a little bit of a circular conversation. I just want to highlight and say that it's an issue, it's a concern with a property with this high concentration of LIHTC units with respect to TIF revenue, basically, because our program, while it's called CHIP, is really a TIF program. So I just want to highlight that because it's a real concern. Yeah.
And we probably won't solve it today, but we appreciate your taking our questions about it. The other half of it, of course, is the lack of for sale housing, which it didn't surprise the committee, but it surprised a lot of residents in the community. And you did express a willingness to possibly partner with a for sale developer. I just wonder if have you done that before? You probably haven't explored it with regard to this project, but if you have, I'd be interested in hearing about that. But what's your experience in doing that?
Yeah, so we have across the country done other like large multi-phase projects where there is a home ownership component. I think like for kind of LIHTC, it's a national program, so kind of it carries from place to place. But home ownership programs vary significantly from state to state, and it even varies from year to year. And in seeing the public input about so much interest in home ownership, I did do a little bit more research into the programs that VHCB has available, and I think it seems like there is kind of continued focus on this. So this is something that we're happy to kind of explore a little bit more to see what this would look like. But for example, for the project we have in Hartford, that's 400 units. We have about 20 units of home ownership that we're working with the state on getting funded. I think the challenge oftentimes becomes what is the cost to build the unit? What is affordable look like? And what is available in the market for people if the affordable homeownership unit will actually restrict how much equity they're going to be able to kind of raise themselves, like how much of the appreciation they're going to be able to recoup. That limits the pool of people who would be interested, but also have the financial capacity to buy the unit. And oftentimes the challenge that we see is individuals kind of stretching themselves to fall within the right income bracket for buying that unit, then maybe not having challenges with kind of the cost of home ownership. So those are all like the factors that we think about that make us shy away from home ownership, but it's not that we haven't done it. And the model of doing home ownership is a little different also in the selling and pre-selling is a bigger part of that, and we don't have as robust of a team that does that. So our first instinct would definitely be to look for a partner, but we have done home ownership units in other multi-phase projects.
Is there in terms of your funding, is there right now you have 40 units? Is there a limit? At what point does it just not makes, a lot of people said, well, can we have half for sale and half rental? I have no idea whether that's workable or not, but maybe you can off the top of your head. But there must be is there a limit somewhere to making that big a change in the plan?
So for us, the phasing plan means that each phase is kind of financially independent. That being said, because we have on-site property management, we want to make sure we have enough density to make it make sense to have the full-time staff there and make it efficient. So I would say, off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to say what the tipping point would be here. Um, but I think one of my concerns with having another develop or a partner doing homeownership that would be half of the units is concerns about their capacity to execute on that piece. We wouldn't ourselves be uh, because we're primarily multifamily rental developers, we wouldn't do a project that would be half home ownership. That's just too much for us. This is not who we are, and we're not the good fit if primarily home ownership is what the city is looking for or needs.
Good, thank you. That's a good, honest answer. I appreciate that.
It's like a marriage, right? So we can't. It has to be a two-way street, and we need to make sense for you.
Other questions? I have some, but Adrian, do you have some?
You can go ahead.
I'm assuming that these buildings are all electric,
Yes.
no fossil fuels. Have you contemplated power generation, solar power generation, anything like that, battery backup?
Yeah. So
got some questions about that.
We have done solar, and we're working on a geothermal project right now. I think from a solar perspective, it's all about costs and making sure we are siting the buildings to be most efficient for solar and can kind of finance it because the solar tax credits have gone away in the most recent kind of year or so.
Maybe they'll come back.
Maybe they'll come back. We can always hope. But because the geothermal tax credit is still around, we're working on a project in Chelsea, Mass, that has geothermal. So I think that would take some further investigation about the site, because whether a site's appropriate for geothermal is really about what's underneath the ground, what's the rock like.
Yeah. I'm a little. It's interesting that everyone we've talked to has made it pretty clear that these plans are early concepts and subject to change. I was curious about your community outreach process where you hold community forums, you do design charrettes. I mean, how does that process work? How long does that process? When does it begin, and how long does it last? It sounds like it can be very effective, but requires a lot of input.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes in this arena, we work collaboratively with the city and municipality to figure out what are the groups that we need to make sure we talk to, and how do we get to a place where we get to a conceptual plan that we all feel comfortable with. And but I would say that the kind of community engagement process and the feedback process doesn't really ever have to stop. It's more just we can't move buildings once we're kind of at construction drawings, but I think I would say we see the community engagement process as all throughout. It doesn't end with getting permits or building permits. But I think from here until zoning, we're kind of would work collaboratively with the city to figure out how many meetings would make sense, where we should have the meetings to make sure they're accessible, what groups we should make sure we meet with even outside of these meetings. I think we would look to work with the city to kind of create a robust plan that everyone feels comfortable with.
Yeah, I can pretty much assure you that the city input will survive the complete duration of the project. No doubts about that. Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if we could hear from Haynes Construction or from somebody on the team to talk a little bit more. I'm just curious about I really believe like that it's great to get outside expertise into Vermont. So I really value that. And yet at the same time, I just wonder about like experience working in Vermont, like the workforce challenges that we're experiencing. What does it mean for an out-of-state construction company to come to Montpelier to build something of this scale? What does that look like? What do the subs look like? And what relationships already exist in Vermont that make that approach viable?
I'm Eric with Haynes. We've been in business for about 64 years, doing construction, multifamily housing, almost on 30 years now. I've been with the company 26 years, and we've been doing work with Pennrose now for we've done 16 projects together in, I'm going to say, the last 15 years, so almost a project a year. We're all through New England, Lower New York, and upstate New York. Vermont-wise, we've done some work in Vermont more for personal work, but we do have subs that we know up there. I've talked to actually subcontractors in the New England area. They're actually interested in working in Vermont. A lot of us, Connecticut, I don't know if you want to say subcontractors, but we have a good relationship. They travel with us. Our budgets are actually based on the surrounding areas. We did talk to a few local subs for input for budget wise. But we do, when we do jobs in different states and throughout for bidding, we advertise, we get local subs to participate. We do job fairs for hiring. We'll probably create, could be 100 jobs per phase, if not more for each. So we welcome subcontractors locally. We meet participation requirements or exceed them. And we've built a similar project like Carmen said in Hartford with Pennrose. So we're familiar with this kind of construction. We do multifamily housing, throughout New England.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we like to do is we like to have a contractor even at this early stage because they can help guide the process to make sure that we are building something that makes sense. They can get sub feedback. They can start building that sub base that would be interested in this project and can help execute this. And we're doing this all throughout the whole design process.
Do you ever do any modular
So
construction?
we actually have a modular building going up right now in Pennsylvania. I think it's a hit or miss sometimes, depending on making sure you have a manufacturer that's trustworthy because you're giving them a big deposit at the beginning. And there have been many instances where modular manufacturers have gone kind of out of business in the middle of construction. And it really depends on the site and making sure that you have kind of this site would have enough site space to do modular. So it's something that we are looking more closely at, given its kind of greater amount of popularity and more people utilizing it makes it a less risky proposition. So it's something that we could consider for the site.
The site is an old golf course. It's enrolled in the BRELA program. There's still some, quite a bit of investigation has to be done. It does not yet have a complete remediation plan. I know it was mentioned in the proposal that you've had some projects like that. I'm just curious what your experience is working on brownfield projects like that.
Yeah, so I would say that in Connecticut, almost all of our projects are on brownfield sites because Connecticut doesn't have any greenfield sites. So we're very familiar with working on sites that have kind of environmental contaminants, even on former manufacturing sites that have a lot of contaminants. We regularly work with our environmental consultant, civil engineer, and geotech to figure out how we manage soils on site, how we make sure that we're guiding the contractor ahead of time as to what they can or can't do on the site, where we can put soils under buildings or under pavement so that it doesn't kind of have human health impacts. We're working on a soil management plan right now for a project we're doing. That was a former school that we're turning into housing. I think we have a lot of experience working with brownfields and have experience working with the team to make sure we figure out how to manage the soil ahead of time, and create, I guess, even sometimes changing the grades to make sure that we can um, keep soil on site and not export if there is contaminants.
In terms of your cost estimates, does your proposal anticipate in any way the requirements of a brownfield remediation?
So I'm sure we have some site costs in there, but
Mhm.
because we don't have clear kind of sampling data as to like what the levels are, it's hard. We don't have exact estimates from a waste disposal receival facility that's incorporated into our plans. But we do have some site work. So I think that is the open question and one of the first ones that we would tackle,
Mhm.
understanding more about what's in the ground, because that's one of the risks of any project like this is what's under the ground.
Um, I'm a little curious as to the the marketing work that led you to the the unit design for the project, and what you'll do from as a next step to sort of confirm those choices.
Yeah, so I think a lot of kind of oftentimes the unit mix and the AMI levels that we kind of put into our projects are oftentimes driven by actually what the state QAP requirements are, because they are the ones funding the project and ultimately kind of those who have the gold make the rules. That is one of the kind of starting points. But from there, we did kind of we took a look at what the market rate rents are. We took a look at what kind of the average household size is in the city, which is like a little over two. So that's why we have a kind of vast majority of units as 1 or 2 bedrooms with some 3 bedrooms. Um, but after this, one of the first things we'll have to do also is kind of engage a full market study from a consultant to better assess kind of rent levels, the capture rates for each of the different AMI levels, and bedroom sizes.
Um, one of the other things that I noticed in going through the comments, it sort of surprised me a little bit, but um, people looked at all of the parking and said, "Gee, that's a lot of parking." And what are seniors going to do when there's 18 inches of snow in their car? And so they were asking about structured parking, essentially, either under building or first floor parking or covered parking or less parking. I mean, it was an issue that people asked about, and I'm just curious how you look at it and what sort of alternatives you might cook up to respond to some of those questions.
Yeah, so I guess first of all, I would like to say that our team are not definitely not pro parking people. Like I myself don't own a car. Becca basically bikes 360 days of the year. And I think because of the phasing plan, we have flexibility to adjust the amount of parking for the site. We Since the submission of the proposal, we have talked to kind of a service provider that services the area, and they suggested that we actually see if there's a way we can incorporate a place for a shuttle or a bus to stop, to provide more transit access for folks living on site. We also have started discussing maybe it makes sense in some places, especially for ADA parking space areas, to see if we can create some covered parking areas. So those are a few of the things that we've been talking about since seeing that. Becca, you're welcome to chime in.
Yeah,
Oops. Maybe.
I'll talk to yours.
Yep.
Sorry, Joe and I are in the same room. I just wanted to add, we did a little research on kind of what we have in our portfolio for snow removal and how we manage snow removal with a fair amount of surface parking. And typically we have a contract for snow removal locally, and we'll work with that contractor and management to come up with a phasing plan for moving cars to efficiently and effectively move snow from specific places in a very detailed kind of rotation. So I think a combination of potentially covering some spaces and having those more protected from snow for accessibility, and then this phasing plan in partnership with our snow removal contractor is how we would kind of account for that challenge. The other thing that I'm working on a site in Western Mass, which also gets a fair amount of snow, and we've worked with the civil engineer and geotech to build kind of areas of the site that are specific for storing snow, so that it's not everywhere in piles all over the site, but it's strategic and it's more effective for management, safer for residents, and still lets site circulation kind of happen throughout the winter season. Mm-hmm. So that's some of the kind of legwork we've done in our experience there.
Yeah. And sorry, this is Paul again. And in terms of architecture and constructability, we looked at the actionable plan and some of the earlier master plans that called and envisioned structured parking as podium parking, I mean parking underneath with the residents above. Mm-hmm. And that becomes one, it's a very costly construction type. And if we already are proposing a 3 or 4 story building, now to provide the housing, it pushes everything up higher,
sure,
taller buildings, but it also has a negative effect on the ground floor, where now all of your walls, that there's no windows or doors that people are living in and out of, and it creates, you've probably seen it in cities where there's a parking garage and the first ground floor is dead of life, and it's hard to treat architecturally, and it's just doesn't create a nice streetscape, which the central spine that we're proposing, we envision it with a sidewalks, a bike path, and sort of a very active intermodal transportation spine. And I think that the windows and the doors at a ground level are very important for livability for those residences, as well as the feeling from the exterior of the building and looking at the building and engaging with the building.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of trade-offs.
Yeah,
certainly. I missed a little bit about discussions with transit companies. Have you had any discussions, or you would plan to have them? But have you had any discussions with local transit? Public transit?
Yeah, we haven't had those discussions yet. We talked to Capstone, and they said that that shuttles would be really effective for the population they serve, and just a little bit about how they've pursued that. So we would kind of start talking to them and their experience and what the folks that they serve typically need, and then try to carry on some of those conversations as we consider our own site. We have done it at other projects where we have a shuttle, maybe it's a shuttle to a senior center, maybe it's a shuttle to a healthcare clinic or a grocery store, and that kind of would be separate from a potential bus stop by the site that would be with the transit agency. So we've done all of these things at previous projects and pursue kind of all options here. Typically at the beginning, we throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So.
Sure. Yeah, and it gets easier as more gets built. So, and there's more people. Yeah, no, it makes sense. We're coming close to the end of our time. Are there any other questions from the committee or city staff? Just want to make sure everybody has a shot.
Sal, if Matt or Mike don't have a question, I might just ask of the team. I mean, I think all of us on the committee are very optimistic that this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for the city of Montpelier. And it's like, we're moving forward boldly into the future, and that feels great. Also, it's our job to mitigate risk to the city and to the taxpayers. And I'm just curious, like, as folks that do this kind of work really across the country, what do you see as the largest risk to success on this project, and how can the city best mitigate it?
I think that my first response to the RFP was, wow, that's a lot of units that the city wants to do. And that's one of the reasons why we have a phasing plan, is because I think to have all of it done all at once in a city of this size, I think that's a big risk. And it's one about what product you're going to get, but two also is making sure that after it's built, that these get occupied and get occupied in the way that you're with that serves the vision and the mission of the city. I think the scale of it is bold, but the scale of it is also a lot of units if it's done all at once.
So if it's your plan goes to 2034, that doesn't sound like all at once to me, but
Yeah, that's right.
is
That's
pretty
right.
quick. Is there so it's your immediate reaction was, wow, that's a lot of housing. What would be a reasonable amount of housing? I mean, if you could pick a number, what would it be?
No, I think it's great. I
Mhm.
think I think with the phasing plan, it's actually a measured approach
Much.
that will allow
Mhm.
us to
Okay.
kind of adjust over time. It's more like, I know there are other proposals where they're like, we want to do this all in one go or in
Yeah.
two go, and that's, I think, a little too fast. And I think our our plan to get to 2034 is still like one a year. And as we discussed early, that might be aggressive for the state. I think I think having a phased approach to this is the right approach, which is why that's what we've proposed.
Yeah, and you'll get to review absorption rate and so on. Yeah. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask for, not now, but as a follow-up, it would be helpful to look at the phasing and what you expect from the public sources, the LIHTC and the VHCB and the home and the Housing Trust Fund, all those friendly sources that make the pro forma work, on a phasing level, like what you'd be looking for roughly on that trajectory of 2026 or 2027 to 2034, I think was the final date of the final phase. It would just be really helpful to be able to right size that in our perspective, when we know that Vermont's allocation is roughly 25, 26 million of equity comes from the credits. And so we just want to make sure, even though there's great support, and I work right now, this is my client, Montpelier, I also work in 8 other communities that need housing too. And so it's not going to be a test of whether people support affordable housing in Montpelier. Whether they give all the credits to Montpelier is extremely unlikely. I mean, it's never going to happen, honestly. It's just not going to happen. So I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party, but I want to be the realist to say we ought to make sure that we're doing this in a realistic way with our eyes wide open. And I just don't want people to walk away with a false sense of hope that because everyone wants Country Club Road to succeed, that all the resources will flow there for the next foreseeable future. It just won't happen. So
and Brian, I just want to say, like, I really appreciate that. And I think, like, actually getting that, identifying potential gaps in the phasing, the financing in the phased approach allows us as a city to consider what are the other resources and partnerships that we might be able to bring to the table to fill that gap in a more kind of realistic way. Right. So it's not like, let's prove that this project can't happen. It's let's identify, like, let's make sure we're on the same page and then see what resources can be leveraged by the state or, by other sources as well.
Great. I guess one other thing that we've seen across the nation for affordable housing projects is in the past, it's you build it and they will come. And I feel like that's no longer the case in a lot of communities where, especially if you're building 80% workforce units, what we call workforce, the there is still kind of least up risk with affordable housing projects. And that's why we need to be careful with our underwriting and careful with kind of the market risk that we're assuming here. And I think even if it's affordable, it's serving a wide range of people. And those people are increasingly having options also.
You know, you're just talking about this made me, I'm just recalling people's conversations about wanting to bring families, to Montpelier. And I mean, we've had people tell us that, families don't live in apartment buildings. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily true.
That's
I think
true
there's
from
millions
our
of people
experience.
who have families. But that is a concern. I mean, we want to encourage families who are not moving to Montpelier because there is no suitable housing or housing that they can't afford, so they're moved to the surrounding towns. Do you think that this plan will, in fact, attract, I don't know, starter families, small families as a first step? I mean, that would be something that I certainly would like to see come out of this.
Yeah. I mean, I think my first reaction to that was, what is the amenity of this site? And it's all the recreation that's going to be happening here. I think that's going to be so attractive to families. And I think because it's creating a neighborhood feel here, that this would be very attractive to families.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Go ahead, Becca.
Yeah, no, also, I mean, the goal here, not just amenities and outdoor space, but also that we as Penrose, as a management company, and developers, like we can bring a lot of services here. There's childcare on site, there's town resources, we can work hard to connect families with a lot of the resources they need in the town and beyond. So that's part of the service that we provide as a developer that also has a linked management company. And we talk about this all the time. And throughout the process, we'll be building partnerships with service providers. And that, I think, will really support a whole range of household types at the site. We're excited to do that.
Yeah, great. No, thank you for that. Well, I want to thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you bringing members of the team. It was good to hear from everybody. Brian, I guess what's the next step? We have one more interview, and then we may have we may be getting back to people with questions that came out of these interviews. So there'll be another iteration.
Yeah, we will follow up with subcommittee questions that to probably to each team to continue this in an iterative process. It won't be like a thumbs up for one right away. It'll be a work in progress, if you will. And so we'll be in touch with that.
Okay, great.
Great,
We appreciate the questions and the conversation.
That was great to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Nice meeting everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
As part of our subcommittee agenda, we now have an opportunity for public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment? Hearing none. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.